Winning the Revolutionary War was honestly a miracle. The American colonists, just a ragtag group of farmers and merchants, had faced down the mighty British Empire. They had fought for a big idea, freedom. But when the fighting stopped in 1783, the real challenge began. The new United States was not very united at all. It was more like 13 separate little countries, each with its own ideas, its own money, and its own problems. They had worked together to win the war, but now that the common enemy was gone, old rivalries and arguments started to bubble up again. The future looked uncertain, and the dream of a new republic felt very fragile. One of the biggest problems was money. The war had been incredibly expensive. To pay for soldiers, guns, and supplies, the new government, under a weak set of rules called the Articles of Confederation, had borrowed a lot of money. Now, the country was deeply in debt. But the central government had no power to tax the people directly. It could only ask the states for money, and the states often said no. Soldiers who had fought bravely for independence came home to find they might lose their farms because they couldn't pay their taxes. This created a lot of anger and frustration, and some people wondered if they had fought for nothing. The weak government created other problems too. States argued with each other over land and trade. New York would put taxes on goods coming from New Jersey. Virginia and Pennsylvania squabbled over territory in the West. It was chaos. The government couldn't even protect its own borders or its own merchants. Pirates attacked American ships, and foreign countries like Britain and Spain didn't take the new nation seriously. They saw a weak, divided country that might fall apart at any moment. The dream of liberty and justice for all seemed to be slipping away into confusion and disorder. This difficult time showed everyone that something had to change. A moment of crisis came with Shays' Rebellion in Massachusetts, where angry farmers, led by a war veteran named Daniel Shays, rose up against the government. They were about to lose their farms because of debt. The rebellion was put down, but it sent a shockwave across the 13 states. It was a wake-up call. Leaders like George Washington and James Madison realized that the Articles of Confederation were not working. A weak government could not protect the people or their liberty. To survive, America needed a new plan, a stronger foundation for its future. The problems were clear. A new plan was needed. In the hot summer of 1787, leaders from 12 of the 13 states gathered in Philadelphia. They came to fix the Articles of Confederation, but they soon realized that fixing wasn't enough. They needed to start over. This meeting became known as the Constitutional Convention. For 4 long months, brilliant minds like James Madison, Benjamin Franklin, and Alexander Hamilton debated, argued, and compromised. They were trying to answer a very difficult question. How do you create a government that is strong enough to rule, but not so strong that it takes away people's freedom? The result of their hard work was the United States Constitution. It was a revolutionary document. The big idea was to divide power so that no single person or group could become too powerful. They created 3 separate branches of government. The legislative branch, called Congress, would make the laws. The executive branch, led by the president, would carry out the laws. And the judicial branch, with the Supreme Court at its head, would interpret the laws. This separation of powers was a clever way to keep the government in check. Each branch could limit the power of the other 2, a system called checks and balances. Another big debate was about representation. How should the states be represented in the new Congress? The big states with large populations wanted representation based on how many people lived there. The small states were afraid they would be ignored. They wanted every state to have an equal vote. The solution was called the Great Compromise. It created a Congress with 2 parts, or houses. In the House of Representatives, representation would be based on population. In the Senate, every state would get 2 senators, no matter its size. This compromise saved the convention and made it possible for big and small states to work together. Finally, the Constitution established a system of federalism. This means that power is shared between the national government and the state governments. The national government would be in charge of things that affected the whole country, like defending the nation and managing trade between states. The state governments would handle more local issues like schools and local laws. After months of debate, the new constitution was ready, but it still needed to be approved or ratified by the states. This led to more arguments across the country, but eventually, the new framework for the American Republic was adopted, promising a more perfect union. With the new Constitution in place, the United States was ready to begin. The country needed a leader, and everyone agreed on who it should be. George Washington, the hero of the Revolutionary War, was unanimously elected as the first president. In 1789, he took the oath of office in New York City, the nation's temporary capital. Washington was a reluctant president. He would have preferred a quiet life on his farm in Virginia, but he knew his country needed him. He understood that everything he did would set an example or precedent for all future presidents. He had to show the world that this new form of government could really work. One of the first tasks for the new government was to protect the rights of the people. Many people were worried that the new Constitution didn't do enough to guarantee individual freedoms. To ease these fears, James Madison wrote a series of amendments to the Constitution. These first 10 amendments are known as the Bill of Rights. They protect some of the most important freedoms that Americans cherish. These include the freedom of speech, the freedom of religion, and the freedom of the press. The Bill of Rights promised that the new, stronger government would not be able to trample on the liberties of its citizens. Washington's presidency also faced huge financial challenges. The nation was still broke. The man Washington chose to fix this was his brilliant and energetic Secretary of the Treasury, Alexander Hamilton. Hamilton had a bold plan. He wanted the national government to take over all the debts from the war, including the debts of the individual states. This was controversial, but it helped to establish the nation's credit and show the world that the United States would pay its bills. Hamilton also created a national bank to manage the country's money. His policies created a strong foundation for the American economy. As president, Washington guided the nation with a steady hand. He kept the country out of wars in Europe, even when it was tempting to get involved. He showed that a president could be powerful without being a king. When he decided to step down after 2 terms, he set another important precedent. He showed that in a republic, power should be transferred peacefully. In his farewell address, he warned the country against political divisions and getting too involved in foreign conflicts. Washington's leadership was essential in turning the words of the Constitution into a living, working government for the people. After the Republic was established, the young nation began to look west. The original 13 states were just a thin strip of land along the Atlantic coast. Beyond them lay a vast, unknown continent. The idea of moving west was exciting for many Americans. It offered the promise of cheap land, a new start, and the chance to build a better life. This westward movement was a defining feature of America in the 19th century. In 1803, President Thomas Jefferson made a decision that doubled the size of the country overnight. He purchased a huge area of land from France called the Louisiana Purchase, stretching from the Mississippi River to the Rocky Mountains. This purchase fueled a powerful idea called manifest destiny. This was the belief that the United States was destined or chosen by God to expand across the entire continent, from the Atlantic to the Pacific Ocean. It was seen as the nation's obvious or manifest destiny. For settlers heading west in their covered wagons, this idea was a source of great inspiration and courage. They saw themselves as pioneers, taming a wild frontier and spreading democracy and civilization. They faced incredible hardships on their journeys, from dangerous river crossings to harsh weather and disease, but the dream of a new life pushed them onward. However, the story of westward expansion looks very different from another perspective. The land that settlers saw as empty and waiting for them was already home to hundreds of Native American tribes. For thousands of years, these tribes had lived on the land, with their own cultures, languages, and ways of life. For them, manifest destiny was not a dream, it was a nightmare. The arrival of settlers meant the loss of their land, the destruction of the buffalo they depended on, and violent conflicts. The United States government repeatedly broke treaties and forced tribes to move from their ancestral homes onto smaller, unfamiliar lands called reservations. The expansion westward was a story of both progress and tragedy. It built the nation as we know it today, a country that spans a continent. It created new states and new opportunities for millions of people. But this growth came at a terrible cost to Native American peoples. Their populations were devastated and their cultures were nearly destroyed. The journey west, like the Trail of Tears, which saw the forced removal of the Cherokee Nation, is a dark chapter in American history. It reminds us that the building of the nation involved deep and painful conflicts that still affect people today. As the United States expanded westward, a deep and bitter disagreement grew stronger. The issue was slavery. In the southern states, the economy was built on large plantations that grew crops like cotton and tobacco. This system depended on the forced labor of millions of enslaved African Americans. In the northern states, the economy was more industrial, and slavery had been mostly outlawed. As new territories in the West applied to become states, the question was always the same. Would they be free states or slave states? This question created a deep division, a crack in the foundation of the republic. For decades, politicians tried to find compromises to hold the country together, but the anger on both sides only grew. People in the North increasingly saw slavery as a moral evil that went against the nation's founding belief that all men are created equal. People in the South fiercely defended slavery, seeing it as essential to their economy and way of life. The country was like a house divided against itself. In 1860, Abraham Lincoln was elected president. He was against the spread of slavery into the new territories. Southern states feared he would try to end slavery everywhere. In response, they began to secede, or leave, the Union to form their own country. The secession of the southern states led to the Civil War, the deadliest conflict in American history. It lasted 4 long, bloody years, from 1861 to 1865. Brother fought against brother, and the nation tore itself apart. The war was not just about preserving the Union, it became a war to end slavery. In 1863, President Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation, which declared that all enslaved people in the rebellious states were free. This changed the meaning of the war. It became a struggle for freedom, and a chance to truly live up to the ideals of the Declaration of Independence. In the end, the North, with its greater population and industrial power, won the war. The Union was saved, and slavery was abolished forever by the 13th Amendment to the Constitution, but the cost was immense. More than 600,000 soldiers died, and much of the South was left in ruins. Abraham Lincoln, who had led the nation through its darkest hour with courage and wisdom, was assassinated just days after the war ended. The great challenge now was to heal the nation's wounds and figure out how to bring the newly freed African Americans into the life of the country as full citizens. After the Civil War, America entered a period of incredible growth and change. This era, from the 1870s to about 1900, is often called the Gilded Age. The name suggests that while it looked golden and prosperous on the surface, there were serious problems underneath. On the surface, the nation was booming. New inventions like the telephone and the electric light bulb were changing daily life. Railroads stitched the country together, allowing goods and people to move faster than ever before. Great cities like New York and Chicago grew at a breathtaking pace, with towering new buildings called skyscrapers reaching for the sky. This was the age of big business. Powerful and ambitious men, sometimes called captains of industry or robber barons, built enormous fortunes. Andrew Carnegie built a massive steel empire. John D. Rockefeller created a monopoly in the oil industry with his company, Standard Oil. These men were celebrated for their success and their role in building America into an industrial powerhouse. They believed in hard work and competition, and they created vast companies that produced goods on a scale the world had never seen before. The United States was rapidly becoming the world's leading manufacturing nation. However, beneath this glittering surface of wealth, life was very different for most people. Millions of workers, including women and children, toiled in factories, mines, and mills for long hours and very low pay. Working conditions were often dangerous, with few safety rules. If a worker was injured on the job, they were often fired with no help. Families lived crowded together in poor, unsanitary neighborhoods called tenements. At the same time, millions of immigrants were arriving from Europe and Asia, seeking a better life but often finding themselves in these same difficult conditions, facing prejudice and hardship. This stark contrast between the immense wealth of a few and the difficult lives of the many created a lot of tension. Workers began to organize into labor unions to fight for better wages, safer conditions, and an 8-hour workday. They sometimes went on strike, refusing to work, which often led to violent clashes with company guards or the police. The Gilded Age was a time of great progress and innovation, but it was also a time of deep inequality and social unrest. It raised difficult questions about the meaning of freedom and opportunity in a new industrial society. For most of its history, America had tried to stay out of the problems of other countries. This policy was called isolationism. But in the early 20th century, the world was getting smaller. Events happening far across the ocean began to affect the United States. In 1914, a massive war broke out in Europe, which became known as World War I. For 3 years, America stayed neutral. But when German submarines began sinking American ships, and it was discovered that Germany was trying to get Mexico to attack the United States, President Woodrow Wilson decided the nation had to act. The United States entered the war in 1917 to make the world safe for democracy. American soldiers helped turn the tide of the war, leading to victory for the Allies in 1918. After the war, America's role in the world had changed. It was now seen as a major global power. However, the country was not yet ready to accept this role. It returned to isolationism during the 1920s and 1930s. Then, another, even bigger conflict began. In the 1930s, aggressive dictators came to power in Germany, Italy, and Japan. They began to invade their neighbors, and in 1939, World War II started. Once again, America tried to stay out of the fight. Everything changed on December 7, 1941. On that day, Japan launched a surprise attack on the American naval base at Pearl Harbor in Hawaii. The attack was devastating, and it united the country in anger and resolve. The United States declared war on Japan, and a few days later, Germany and Italy declared war on the United States. America was now fully involved in a global conflict. The war effort at home was enormous. Factories that once made cars started making tanks and airplanes. Millions of men went to fight, while women, symbolized by Rosie the Riveter, went to work in the factories to support the war. The United States and its allies, including Great Britain and the Soviet Union, fought a long, hard war on 2 fronts, in Europe against Germany and Italy, and in the Pacific against Japan. The war ended in 1945 after the Allies defeated Germany, and after the United States used a powerful new weapon, the atomic bomb, on 2 Japanese cities. When the war was over, the old world was in ruins. America, however, emerged from the war stronger than ever. Its cities were not bombed, and its economy was booming. The United States was now undeniably the most powerful nation on Earth, ready to lead the world into a new era. The years after World War II were a time of great prosperity for many Americans, but not for everyone. The promise of liberty and justice for all still felt empty for African Americans, especially in the South. They faced segregation, which meant they were forced to use separate, and almost always worse, schools, water fountains, and restaurants. They were also denied the right to vote. In the 1950s and 1960s, a powerful new movement emerged to challenge this injustice. This was the Civil Rights Movement, led by inspiring figures like Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Through non-violent protests like marches, sit-ins, and boycotts, they demanded equal rights. The struggle was long and often dangerous, but it brought about historic change. The Civil Rights Act of 1964 outlawed segregation in public places, and the Voting Rights Act of 1965 protected the right to vote for all citizens. These laws were huge victories that helped to make America a more just society. The fight for equality inspired other groups as well. Women, Hispanic Americans, Native Americans, and others also began to organize and demand their full rights and an end to discrimination. It was a time of social upheaval, a period when America was forced to look at itself and try to live up to its own ideals. Alongside these social changes, the post-war era was a time of incredible technological innovation. The space race with the Soviet Union led to one of humanity's greatest achievements, landing a man on the moon in 1969. In the later part of the 20th century, the invention of the personal computer and the internet started a digital revolution. This revolution has changed everything about how we live, work, and communicate with each other. Information that was once hard to find is now available instantly at our fingertips. These inventions have connected the world in new ways and created whole new industries and economies. Modern America has also faced many challenges. The country fought long and difficult wars in Vietnam, and more recently in Iraq and Afghanistan. There have been economic recessions where people lost their jobs and businesses struggled. Debates over issues like immigration, healthcare, and the role of government continue to divide the nation. The terrorist attacks on September 11, 2001, were a terrible shock that led to major changes in national security. Through all these trials, the country continues to debate and struggle with the big questions that have been there since the beginning. How to balance freedom and security, and how to create a fair and just society for everyone. From its chaotic beginnings after a difficult war, America's journey has been a long and complex story. It is a story of turning 13 quarreling states into a single, powerful republic under the guidance of a remarkable constitution. This document, designed to be both strong and flexible, has been the nation's guide through centuries of change. The journey has not been smooth. It has been marked by deep divisions, like the terrible Civil War that nearly tore the nation apart, but ultimately ended the great injustice of slavery. It is a story of constant struggle and argument, which is part of the messy process of democracy. The nation's story is also one of incredible growth and resilience. It expanded across a continent, a process that brought both opportunity and tragedy. It transformed from a nation of farmers into the world's greatest industrial power, creating immense wealth and new technologies that changed the world. Through the Gilded Age, it wrestled with the problems of inequality. Through 2 world wars, it stepped away from isolation and accepted its role as a global leader. Time and time again, when faced with a crisis, Americans have found a way to overcome challenges and rebuild, showing a remarkable ability to bounce back. This resilience is perhaps America's most defining characteristic. The country has always been an experiment, a work in progress. It is constantly changing, shaped by the millions of people who have come from all over the world seeking freedom and a better life. The ongoing fight for civil rights shows that the work of creating a more perfect union is never truly finished. Each generation faces its own set of challenges and is called upon to continue the struggle to make the nation's ideals a reality for all its citizens. This constant effort to improve and adapt is at the heart of the American experience. Today, the United States continues to hold a position of great influence in the world. Its culture, its economy, and its political ideas affect people everywhere. The nation still faces serious challenges both at home and abroad, but the history of America, from the Constitutional Convention to the present day, is a powerful reminder of the nation's capacity for reinvention and renewal. The American experiment continues, a testament to the enduring power of its founding ideas and the resilience of its people, always striving to live up to the promise of its past and build a better future.